Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I'm back with part two of my 800 subscriber Ask Me Anything. You asked me a lot of questions, I've got a lot of answers. That's why we have multiple videos. The last one I got to through a half hour worth of questions. This time I'm going to try and get through all the rest of them because I don't think anybody wants this to be three parts. But let's see what we can do. Let's just jump right into the questions. Hannah Nirvana. Thanks very much for the support, Hannah. Hannah Nirvana says, "What inspired you to create your own ongoing comic book series, The Crime Busters? Could you give us a brief overview of the series and its main characters?" Sure, I love nothing more than to talk about my own comics. Um, I've always wanted to do comics, and it just seemed like there's a lot of gatekeeping. It was just really difficult to, printing costs and distribution and stuff until recently. And now, thanks to the internet and print on demand and crowdfunding, it's much easier to and cheaper to actually print comics and much easier to get them out to people through the internet. So um, that's where I sort of decided it was the right time to get into making comics. For the Crime Buster specifically, I really fell in love with a series called Boy Comics. It's a golden age series from the 40s and 50s that had a character called Crime Buster. I really loved that series, and Crime Buster's in the public domain. So I decided, why don't I continue the series? I wanted more issues. I wished it had continued to go. So I thought, I can just continue it myself. So that's where I decided to basically pick up right where Boy Comics 119 left off. So I was going to start with issue 120, have the continuity start right where it left off in 1956. But I did decide, I wanted to make some changes to modernize it. Didn't want to call it Boy Comics because I didn't think it was really very inclusive. There were no recurring female characters in the comic. I wanted to change that. And one thing I really loved about this series is I just loved teen detective stories when I was a kid. The Three Investigators and Trixie Belden and the Hardy Boys. Those are the things that I really loved, and the comic had that feel to it. So I decided to do that. I leaned more into the supernatural, so it's kind of like Scooby Doo. And I created a character named Trixie Trouble, who is a female sleuth. And so Chuck and Trixie sort of team up in the first issue, and they have a lot of sort of supernatural mysteries about, ghosts and, cursed masks, and, Krampus comes in one issue, and a bunch of different things. And so, it's heavily inspired by things like Scooby Doo and the Three Investigators. And we've done 5 issues so far. I've got my new Kickstarter for the first trade collecting all 5 of those issues. That will be coming out. The Kickstarter starts September 13th. I'll have a launch party live stream that night. I've got the link in the comments down below for people who want to check out the pre-launch page. You can just click on the notify me on launch button, and you'll be automatically notified as soon as it goes live, so you don't miss it. We're currently working on issue 6. And this is something, it's an ongoing series. I have a overarching story. Every issue is a self-contained story, but I have a broader sort of arc that it's in. I'm hoping we'll run through about issue 30, and then we'll see where I'm at that point, if I want to keep going or if there's demand to keep going. So that's the short version. Thanks very much for the question, Hannah. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the support. Ashley, the Sweet Spot. Ashley, thanks very much for your support. Asks, what are some key tips for beginners who are just starting to collect classic comics? Well, the main thing is collect what you love. Don't collect what's hot. I said there's no wrong way to collect comics, but like you should collect things that you're going to enjoy. Rather than things for the monetary value or because you're hoping for an investment. Because that if you buy things for the investment value, your enjoyment of them is gonna be tied to how much they're worth. But if you buy something because you just love it, because you love the characters, because you love the story, because you love the comic itself, then the value of it is not necessarily the monetary value. It has a personal value. So buy what you like. Don't buy what's on trend or what the market dictates. Figure out what you like and buy that. I mean, the other tip is right now we're in a downturn, so a lot of keys have gone down from where they were 2 years ago when things went crazy during the lockdown. But generally speaking, most mainstream keys, like superhero keys, are just going to get more expensive. Historically, they've just gone up and up, you know, decade after decade. So one good tip is buy the keys first. The filler issues, yeah, they've gone up a little bit. They might have cost me $3 30 years ago, and now they cost $4. But they're not important. Getting the key issues, if you have a run you're trying to put together, if you get the keys squared away first, it's always going to be easy to get the fill-in issues. I did it the other way around because I wanted to read the story. So if I had $20, I wanted 20 $1 comics and not one $20 comics because I wanted to read 20 stories, right? These days, most people aren't buying the comics to read the stories because it's easier to read them digitally or read them in an omnibus or some other way. People have already read the comics before they get them as collectibles. So if you're going to buy back issues, get the expensive ones first. And you'll be happy you did 5 years from now when that book costs twice as much money. You'll be glad that you bought that instead of buying a bunch of filler issues that aren't worth anything that are still not worth anything. You'll save yourself a lot of money in the long run if you buy the keys first. So that's my tip. Thanks for the questions. I appreciate it. Betty Angel Bella. Hi Betty, thanks for the support. Asks, could you highlight some underrated classic comic series that deserve more attention from collectors? Sure. Well, I mean, there's lots of Golden Age books that are Boy Comics is the series I was just talking about, and for me, it's a series that ran for 14 years. And it's just not really collected that much anymore because it's been out of the public eye since the 50s, but there's a lot of great writing in that series. The story always comes first for me, so there's a lot of series with great writing, long-running series that can be very interesting to collect that nobody really collects. I love Unknown Soldier. I love The Losers. Warlord, I just did some videos about Warlord. It's a great series to collect, and actually there's some very hard to find variants, some extremely hard to find Warlord comics that I've never seen and most people have never seen. But the regular versions are worth almost nothing, and you can get all 133 issues very cheap, and you'll have a ton of great reading. And unlike in the last question, those books have not really been collected. So the only way to get the stories is to buy the individual issues. That's a series that's great to read, but if you really want that collector challenge, man, there's a couple Warlord comics that are impossible to find. So it's got sort of the best of both worlds for me. Hope that answered your question well enough. Brain Great Adventures asks, how does the condition of a classic comic book impact its value, and what steps can collectors take to preserve their books? Well, it's the most important thing, particularly these days. There's fewer and fewer collectors, or fewer and fewer readers, so that means that there's more comics available, right? Supply and demand. What that means is that a lot of collectors are only looking for the highest grade books. A lot of people, particularly people that buy CGC books, right? And so there's a lot of books that are very easy to get in lower grade or mid grade, but are really hard to find in high grade. And so as a result of this sort of stratification of the collector base. Um, Books that are really high grade command ridiculous premiums over lower grade books. The difference between a 9.8 and a 9.6 is kind of arbitrary and barely noticeable for most people, if noticeable at all. And yet, a 9.8 might be 5 times as much as a 9.6. So the condition is the most important thing. In terms of preserving your comics, bag them and board them. The board's very important. I have a lot of comics that I get out of dollar bins that have only been damaged because they didn't have a board and they get bent and they have a lot of like spine ticks and bends and stuff. So bag, board, watch out for fingerprints, that sort of thing. Just the basics will do, but storing them flat is actually better, but it's not really practical in a lot of situations. So hopefully that answers your question. Angel Wings. Hi, Angel Wings. Thanks for the support, and I appreciate it. What are some of the rarest variant editions or printings of classic comics that collectors should be aware of? Well, I was just mentioning this Warlord. There's some Whitman variants. Whitman was a company in the 70s and early 80s that would basically have their own print runs with a Whitman logo on it, and they would sell their books in packs of comics in bags where you get like 3 for $1 or whatever at like Kmart's and like supermarkets and department stores and stuff like that, right? And so some of those have incredibly small print runs. And so a book like Warlord 22 Whitman edition, almost impossible to find. There's a couple others. I forget what number. There's an issue DC Comics Presents that's similarly extremely hard to find a Whitman variant. Now, not all Whitmans are worth a lot, but there's a couple specific ones like those that are very difficult. Other one I would mention that I've only found one of these ever, and they're very hard to find, but most people don't know about them, is the price variants, the Archie price variants from the early 60s. So most people are aware of the Marvel price variants from the 70s, where there are like 30-cent versions of books that are normally 25 cents and 35-cent versions of 30-cent books. But a long time before that, Archie did something very similar around 1962, where there are 15-cent variants of books that are normally 12 cents. And one of those is Archie's Madhouse 22, the first appearance of Sabrina, the Teenage Witch. There's a 15-cent variant of that. Those 15-cent variants are very hard to find. So those are some that most people just aren't aware exist at all, but it can be very difficult to get. Okay, Beat 'em Up Dom says, when did you start collecting comics? Well, first of all, thanks for the question. Sorry you're having to beat people up. But it was in 1984, so it was right at the beginning of 1984. So it was just before I turned 11, so I was 10 at the time. And as I mentioned earlier, maybe it was in my last video, I don't remember, but my first comic was Black Hawk 269, and I immediately became a collector. It was later that year, the end of 84, is when I started buying a lot of titles, and then by 85, I was starting to learn about back issues and started getting my first back issues, I think, in 85. In 86, I really started getting into a lot of back issues. So that's the answer to that. Thanks for the question. Big Ben asks, who's your favorite superhero? Well, I don't know. Some of my favorites, I'm a big fan of Wonder Woman. I like Green Arrow. I'm not a huge DC guy overall, but those are a couple of my favorite DC characters. Sandman from DC. I love Sandman Mystery Theater. Marvel, Captain America. Steve Rogers, Captain America. I love Hawkeye. and the Vision. I'm a big Avengers guy, so for me, it's like those three are the Avengers: Captain America, Hawkeye, and Vision. My favorite. It's hard to say. Different time periods, have different. I love Vision, but he was completely destroyed by John Byrne in the late '80s. Some would argue already ruined by Englehart before that, but I think Byrne is what really did it. It's never been the same since. Captain America now is not, the character that I read growing up. Really like Thor a lot, but again, it's just everything's very different. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I really like Green Arrow quite a lot. And Wonder Woman, is it interesting because I love the character, but her actual comics are usually not very good, and often terrible. So it's hard to say. I guess I would say Captain America, but it's kind of a toss-up between all those I just mentioned. I should also say Crime Buster, the character that I make comics about. He's not quite a superhero, though. I would call him a superhero for the first, 15 issues or so of his series. But after issue 17 of Boy Comics, he didn't really have any supervillains other than Ironjaw. So he was really more of a detective, so I'm not really thinking about him. Joey Bro asked, what got you into collecting comics? Was it because of parents or a hobby you just picked up? I've kind of answered this already in some of the other ones. I will say that, my dad did read comics in the 60s. He read a lot of Marvel books like Thor when he was in high school, but more when he was in Vietnam. So he was supportive of it, but it was just a hobby that I picked up. It was just something where, before comics, I collected coins, but I was always into books and reading and storytelling and writing stories, so comics is sort of my thing. Okay, next question. Steve Danielson asks, who is your favorite villain in any Marvel or DC universe, comic or cartoon? My favorite villain is Kang the Conqueror. I'm a huge Avengers fan. I love Kang. I love time travel stories. I love alternate universe stories. We're getting plenty of those, and there's a lot of really bad ones, but I've always loved that stuff. And Kang has had some fantastic stories. A lot of my favorite Avengers stories are Kang stories. In particular, Kurt Busiek just wrote some of the greatest Kang stories of all time, my favorites, and two very different versions of Kang. So in Avengers Forever, which is very much a Kang story, first and foremost, even more in some ways than it was Avengers story. It was about Kang. It was Kang at his prime. It was Kang in his late 30s or 40s, but in his absolute prime, at the height of his power, Kang. And then Kurt Busiek wrote the Kang Dynasty story in Avengers, whatever it was, 41 to 56 or something. And that was an old Kang. It was a Kang who had not become Immortus yet, but he was old and tired and was feeling that weight of mortality, and it was a very different character. And I love that about Kang, that you can tell all these different stories of Kang at different points in his life because he's a time traveler. So I don't know, Kang is just the best for me. I'm hoping I don't know what's going on with the movies right now. I know they might recast, I don't know, but I'm very excited. Even though the last phase has not been great for Marvel, I'm super stoked for Kang, because if they do it right, Kang's the best. So Jack D asks, wait, I missed one. Jason the Geek asks, which superhero do you dislike the most? I mean, I don't really like any of the grim and gritty hero anti-heroes. I don't like Wolverine. I don't like Punisher. Don't really like Batman. I don't mind like 70s Batman. Um, but then 80s Batman just went too far, and everything since then sucked as far as I'm concerned. So I don't like any. I don't like Deadpool at all. Um, there's characters that are treated like anti-heroes but are villains, like Venom. I can't stand Venom. But so basically any of that, the stuff, all that's late 80s, early 90s crap. I just don't like any of those guys. I just don't. Sorry. Um, Jack D asks, if you could be a villain or a superhero, which two would it be? One pick each. Okay, well, let's see. If I could be a villain or superhero. Hmm. Hmm. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a villain or a superhero, but if I could have someone's powers, I would probably pick time travel. So Kang's powers. He's also got the suit. He's got the suit of armor that's like Iron Man's suit, only much more technologically advanced and better. So that's a pretty good set of powers to have, like a much better Iron Man suit, plus you can time travel. So Kang would be my choice. I wouldn't want to be Kang, but I would want Kang's stuff. Because I would love to, I'm a big history buff. I would love to do that. And travel the future would be amazing. Superhero. Again, I wouldn't want the responsibility. I wouldn't want the grim backstory. I wouldn't really want to be any of these people. Um, but if you could have someone's powers, I mean, it's hard to beat Superman because he can do anything. Doctor Strange would be really cool too, though. So, I don't know, two very different characters. Pretty boring, but I guess I say Superman. Danny Wright asks, what's your most valued comic? Like, which one's worth the most, even slabs, if you have any just subbed? I think I answered this already. It's either Avengers 1 or Albedo 2. And they're worth about the same. I'm not really sure which is worth more right now. I think Albedo 2 might be edged ahead, but it's a little hard to say. Very different conditions, so they're in about the same price range. Jordan's asked, if you could only pick 3 comics, graded or not, doesn't matter, but if your place caught fire, which 3 comics would you save? That's a really hard question, because a lot of the comics that are most important to me have a personal connection. Avengers 1, no brainer, because that is not only my most valuable, but has the most personal meaning. But after that, it gets very difficult. Albedo 2 is valuable, and I would never get another one back. Plus, I do think of the history of these books. We're only 2,500 printed, so losing one in a fire is like it's important to comics. Like, I feel like I'm a custodian of these. Boy Comics 3 is also very valuable. First appearance of Crime Buster, and that was a gift from my wife, so that would be on the list. But I have 2 other comics that aren't worth as much, but are of very personal value to me, which is the Gru #1, which is a book that my father and I would both read Gru together, and I have that signed by a couple people. And for similar reasons, my Avengers 4, which is really low grade, but was a present from my father and sort of symbolizes again that relationship. It would be very difficult to figure out which ones to keep. It's tough. It's very tough because again, even the Boy Comics 3, again, I feel like it's not it's not a common book. It's 80 years old. So besides the value, there's the historical importance of the comic, and I wouldn't want that to be destroyed. So it would be hard for me to sort of weigh that against the personal meaning. I would probably pick the Avengers 1, the Albedo 2, and the Boy Comics 3, because the Avengers 1 was also a gift from my parents. I had it signed by Stan Lee at a convention where my father took me to that convention to see him. So it has a lot of the same sentimental values as the Gru and the Avengers 4, but it has more as well. So I would probably pick those three, but it's very tough. It would be three of those five. Thanks for the question. Next question. Zard Nation, do you own any old Pokemon comics? Short and sweet question. I'll give you a short and sweet answer. No, I don't. Pokemon World asks, hottest female villain and hero. This will be cool to ask. Debatable, but I'm not here to judge you. I appreciate your support. So, gee, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. To be honest, I guess. Red Sonja and villain. I mean, I don't know. Don't know. What's that? What's the evil version of Wonder Woman? I can't remember what her name is from Earth 3. Whatever her name is, I guess. Sorry, it's not very good answers, but I really don't have answers for that. I haven't really thought about it. I am an old man now. Starter Squad, but thanks for the question. I do appreciate it. Starter Squad HD asks, what sort of comic related, do you game, like play superhero games on PlayStation, Xbox, or PC? I've always been a big gamer, but recently I have developed arthritis in my hands that typically only bothers me if I game. Particularly like I have like permanent Nintendo thumb from holding the controllers on the control sticks like this. This joint here and this one here. If I play anything with a controller, after a couple hours, I have pain that will last for like days. So I haven't played anything on a console in about 2 years because I can't. I have similar problems with my hands from typing too much if I play games. So there's a lot of superhero games that I've played in the past. I just can't play anything right now. I would say like Marvel Ultimate Alliance was fantastic. That was the best pure superhero game I've ever played. That game was the bomb back in the day. That was great. Yeah, I mean, I hope that answers your question. I played. It was very in MMOs for a long time. I just can't really play anymore. Okay. Joel ZZ9MP asks, how many slabs do you own? How many comics do you own from the Silver Age? How many slabs do I own? Well, I don't know, not that many. I don't really know for sure, but I would say 25? Around 20 to 25. I don't think more than that. Not really a big slabber. And how many comics do you own from the Silver Age? Well, I don't really know the answer to that either, but I have a complete run of Avengers. I have a complete run of Captain America. I have a lot of Silver Age books. I have a lot of Archie Silver Age books. So and a lot of romance. Probably 1,000 Silver Age books. I don't know. It's hard to say, but around 1,000, I would guess. Taylor asks, what is your favorite power in the superhero universe? Favorite power? Well, I mentioned earlier time travel. There aren't really a lot of superheroes with time travel. A couple. Yeah, that's my favorite though. It would be just flying would be great, but it would be tremendous. But time travel would probably be my favorite. Dom asks, do you own any British comics like the old Beano comics? No, I don't. I have a couple, like, British versions of American comics, but I don't really have any British comics. I'm not counting like Captain Britain. I don't think that really counts. I have like a Judge Dredd collection somewhere. I haven't really read it though, so I'm afraid not. Gotta Catch 'Em All asks, "What's your favorite superhero movie?" Favorite superhero movie? I really like The Dark Knight. That was excellent, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite. You know what I mean? Favorite? I mean, I guess Avengers. You know, I'm a huge Avengers fan. So the first Avengers movie I absolutely loved when it came out. Um, so I want to say like, I mean, um, Infinity War is excellent, but it's such a it ends on such a downer. Endgame is also very good, but it's long and it's not perfect. It's not as good. It's not as focused. It gets kind of flabby. But I don't know. I guess I would say probably Avengers Endgame because I do love Avengers. Having said all that, I mean, I think the best MCU movie is Captain America Winter Soldier. Um, and there's probably some superhero movies that are better than that, but my favorite, I don't know, hard to say. I'm going to say Endgame, but I might answer differently at a different time. It's not the best, but it's currently my favorite. Wolf Blitz asks, "What are your goals for comic book collecting for the rest of 2023?" Well, we've only got a few months left. This is going to sound like a weird goal, and I'm going to do a whole nother video on this sometime soon, but I'm going to be doing some more downsizing. Um, I don't want to get into it right now, but I've got more stuff. I've got stuff going on. I'm just, I'm in my 50s now, and things are changing. My priorities are changing. I need to downsize my collection. My focus is more on making comics. So I'm going to be selling off more of my back issues in my collection and really focusing it more and using some of that money to make comics. I mean, last time I did this, I was at about 11,000 comics in my collection. I downsized some. I'm still probably at between 8 and 9,000. So even as much as I downsize, I still have probably too many. I'm going to try and get that down to, I don't know, about 5,000, 5 to 6,000. Like, I want to get rid of probably another 3,000 comics. It's going to be really difficult because I really cut it down a lot last time, and I love buying comics. I like going to comic stores, and so I'm constantly getting stuff that it's not really in my collecting focus. So I need to figure out some parameters. But my goal is actually to focus my collection, downsize more, and really sort of hone in on what's important to me in collecting. So there's nothing in terms of getting issues. It's figuring out which ones I'm going to sell. Robert Bacon, thanks for the question. Robert Bacon asks, top 3 goofball classic era obscure Marvel villains that aren't Conquer Lord. 3 goofball classic era obscure Marvel villains. I read this question once before, and I had a couple of good ones, and I'm kind of blanking on them now. I will say number 1 for me, and this is 3 of them, so it's kind of would be a cheat for me to use this for all of them. But there's a group they called the Triumvirate of Terror that fought the Avengers in Avengers 39. That are just absolutely stupid. Roy Thomas had just taken over the book, and he really hadn't hit his stride yet, and that was just dumb. One of the villains is a guy named Thunderboot, and he's got like a big metal boot that gives him super kicking powers or something. It's just like one of the stupidest characters I've ever seen is Thunderboot. Man Bull. There's a guy named Man Bull that fought the Cat. I think he fought a couple other people somehow, but Man Bull is really stupid. Um, Spider-Man fought some pretty dumb villains in the Silver Age, like Kangaroo and Man Mountain Marco. So, but I think Thunderboot and the Triumvirate of Terror are probably the stupidest villains. Thanks for the question. Guillaume Barnaby asks, what controversial comic opinion do you have that you will defend? Well, I mean, I did a whole video about how I thought Alan Moore um, basically has had a negative impact on comics, not so much because of his work, but because so many people were so heavily influenced by his work that it led to 30 years of just derivative, grim, dark crap. And I think Alan Moore is one of the best writers that comics has seen, particularly in terms of his craft. Right? He's a writer who's an excellent writer who understands the comics medium in a way and is able to do things with it because of that most people can't do. But I don't really love a lot of his stories. So, I have an ongoing argument with my brother about whether someone can be overrated even if they're the best. Because for me, like, I think Michael Jordan is significantly overrated, while I still acknowledge that he's the best player of all time. But I think people overestimate what that means, because people treat Michael Jordan like he's 100 on a scale of 100 and everyone else is like a 70. Whereas I'm like, okay, he's 100, but there are several players that were 99s and 98s. Like, the gap between him and other great players is very small. And I feel the same way with Alan Moore. I think he may be the best writer comics has seen, but he's still significantly overrated. And has just had he unintentionally has had a negative. His legacy has been negative because of the way other people have run with it. People who are not as good as he have run with his ideas. I did a whole video about this. I've had a lot of people downvote that and tell me how stupid I am. So, but I will continue to defend it. Thanks for the question. Boji asks, who's your favorite superhero? I think I answered this already. Q the Master asks, but thank you for the question. It's just someone happened to ask the same question. Q the Master asks, if you could change one thing about your favorite hero, what would it be? I had trouble figuring out who my favorite hero was. But let's just go with Wonder Woman, and I would say if I could change one thing about Wonder Woman, it would be that I wish DC hadn't had the rights to the character. There were decades where DC did not own Wonder Woman. They had an agreement with the Marston estate where as long as they continued to publish a certain number of Wonder Woman comics every year, they would continue to have the rights to the character. And so they had to keep putting out the comic in order to control the character, and if they didn't, it would lapse back to the Marston estate. That's my understanding anyway. And so, Wonder Woman eventually became, this sort of cultural icon, and I think they were getting a lot of like merchandise stuff and cartoon stuff, and like they were making money off of the character without caring about the character. Because they were just milking the character, and it led to decades of crappy comics by people who, like Conniger, who hated the character and hated the fan base, but was doing the comics because they had to. And I wish that something else had happened there. Not sure what. I don't know if what the character's legacy might have been if a different company had taken over. Probably wouldn't have been great either, but it would have been interesting to see. My understanding is that and I could be wrong because I don't have a full understanding, but from what I've read, DC didn't outright get the rights to Wonder Woman until sometime in the late 80s or in the 90s. It would have been interesting if they had let that lapse in the 80s and, Marvel had gotten the rights or something. Only a couple questions left. Groove Dude asks, which lesser-known superhero deserves his own movie, in your opinion? Trying to think of superheroes. I mean, I would love a Sandman Mystery Theater movie. I think that could be absolutely excellent. Yeah, I mean that's the one that immediately comes to mind. There's a lot of cool Golden Age DC characters that will probably never see the light of day, but like I'm a big fan of Hourman, for instance. Those are the ones that come to mind. Hopefully that answers that for you. Lead Paint, hi, thanks for your continued support. I appreciate it. Is that your actual worn, weather aged Bo Sox cap, or did you find that thing in a landfill? It's grubby, it's dirty. I mean, if I've had a lot of comments about how grubby my hats are. That is my actual worn, weathered, and aged Bo Sox cap. I bought that hat, I think, at the beginning in 1998. It might have been 97, but I think it was 98. I've had that hat for 25 years. The grime and weathering and age on that hat is from me wearing it for 25 years. I was just on my vacation, I had the hat with me, and I was thinking I should get a new hat. There was a time when I had a lot of different hats. Back in the day, I had lots of different cool caps, ball caps, and I still have a few of them, but man, I have a hard time finding any of them, and they're all old. The newest one I have is my Wonder Woman hat, which is also really grubby because a couple years ago I got sunscreen all over it, and now it's all a mess. But even that now is several years old and looks it. So I was thinking it's time for me to get a new hat, but probably not a new Red Sox hat. I'm going to wear that until it disintegrates. Last question. Thanks for sticking with me, everyone. Captain Beyond asks, I want to know what is the best magic item you have ever found in a D&D game. Great question. And now that I'm older, I have a different view of this thing. Of course, when I was a kid, it would be like, let me give you the coolest, like most powerful, whatever. But I am a storyteller, and the groups I'm in are run by storytellers and stuff, and so we have we tend to have low magic universes these days, and my dungeon master, when we get magic items nowadays, they're usually not that powerful. They have minor effects, and the fun part about those is that you have to think, how am I going to use this? What clever thing can I do? It's a minor effect, but it can, So coming up when you're going through the game and being like, oh, here's this thing, the ring of Featherfall that I have, or whatever. Maybe I can use it in this interesting way. Having the less powerful items makes you come up with more interesting stories. Having said that, setting the stage where the story is what makes the magic item the best. We had a campaign back when I was in college, way back in the day, that revolved around this helmet, this cursed helmet, this super powerful artifact. And the problem with the helmet was that if you put it on to use it, it would change your alignment. And what ended up happening is my character had to use it, and my character was a priest, and I had my alignment changed so that my alignment was no longer in alignment with, the deity. And we really had to think through, like, what would happen there. Because at the end of the adventure, it was like, well, do I want to find, have that reversed or whatever? And I thought for storytelling reasons, it made more sense that now that my character was a different alignment, he looked at things differently, would have a different sort of morality, and he wouldn't want to go back. He no longer. So I ended up having to switch religions and become a cleric of a totally different god, and all of this stuff. It was all story based, and I had to think, like, who is my character? How is my character react to this? Like, what, and so that's what made that magic item so interesting, is because it really presented a lot of story opportunities that shaped a lot of the stories we went with that character afterwards. So for me, that's the best we've found. So hope that answers the question. Thanks everyone for watching. Went a little longer than I wanted to, but we got it all in. And thanks again, and I'll see you next time.